Hi there, welcome to my third webinar about Scrum. On our previous webinars, we have been talking about how to be a good developer in Scrum. I'd recommend the video if you would like to know more about the expectations from the organization point of view. We have been also talking about how to use Scrum in product development in areas like big data, machine learning, cloud infrastructure. Also a very interesting topic, as big data and cloud infrastructure, they are now in very high demand on the market. Today, I would like to talk about scaling Scrum. I have been asked recently by the client, is there a good way to set up 3 Scrum teams that work together on the same product? Well, in reality, the question was, how would I set up the environment for these 3 Scrum teams? And business context for this client was that they have some internal products they are working on, and they do have already 2 Scrum teams working together on the same product, and they would like to add another Scrum team from GetInData to take care about work that GetInData have high competences in. So altogether, that would be 3 Scrum teams working together on the same product. And well, it's a very interesting question how to set it up. Software nowadays is much larger and more complex than before. It's built from many components, and there are often a lot of internal dependencies between functionalities. There are some external dependencies between our software and some external systems. So naturally, it is kind of usual situation where there are multiple teams working on the same product. And if they want to use Scrum, the question is, is there a good way to set up this cooperation? The answer is yes, it is such a framework designed exactly for that purpose. It's called the Nexus Framework. It is created by Scrum.org, which is perfect. It's designed for scaling Scrum in large, complex software development products involving multiple teams. In general, the Nexus Framework provides you a set of practices, guidelines for coordinating and integrating, very important, integrating the work of multiple Scrum teams. It focuses on improving collaboration, transparency, and alignment among these multiple teams. Before we go on, I would like us to take a minute here and think about this topic from the business perspective. In what business context we should use the Nexus Framework and when we should not. Let me give you some examples. And let's start from the examples where we should use the Nexus Framework. I would say the first main point is large-scale software development products. Because the Nexus Framework is designed exactly for that purpose. It helps organizations to scale their agile practices. So if business is working on a large software development product with multiple teams, the Nexus Framework can help ensure that all teams are working together in a coordinated and efficient way. The second example, I would say, is distributed teams. In today's global business environment, it's kind of common for teams to be distributed across multiple locations. The Nexus Framework can help these teams work together effectively by providing an approach to agile development that everyone can follow regardless their location. Third example, I would say continuous delivery. The Nexus Framework is designed to support continuous delivery, which is the practice of frequently releasing software updates to users. And some business this is crucial for them, they rely on software that needs to be delivered quickly and with many updates. Fourth example, I would say, is complex software ecosystems. Many businesses today rely on complex software ecosystems that include multiple applications, multiple platforms, like a lot of components in a technology. So the Nexus framework can help these businesses to manage this complexity. So these were the examples where we should use Nexus, but well, just to be transparent, there are also some situations, some business contexts where it may not be the best fit, and just so you to be aware of that. And let me also give you an examples of that business context. First is a small software development project. The Nexus framework is not the best fit for small software development projects that can be managed with I would say like a single Scrum team. In such cases, use of Nexus framework may add, well, unnecessary complexity and overhead to the project. Second example, I would say simple software projects. If a software project is relatively simple and does not involve multiple teams, or there is no complex software ecosystem, the Nexus framework may not be needed. In such cases, like really simpler agile framework like Scrum or Kanban may be just fully appropriate. Third example, I would say non-software projects. The Nexus framework is specifically designed for software development projects. Therefore, if a business is working on a project that does not involve software development, the use of Nexus framework might not be even applicable there. And the last example, I would say, is limited resources. The implementation of Nexus framework requires an investment of time, effort, and resources. Therefore, if a business has limited resources or is operating, under tight budget constraints, it may not be practical to adopt the Nexus framework there. Now, when we have better understanding where we can use Nexus framework in our business context, let's try to go over the Nexus framework diagram so it's more clear how to set up the work environment for multiple teams. And let me start from the really fundamental information about the Nexus framework, all right? The Nexus framework is based on Scrum framework. So if your team knows how to use Scrum, if your organization is familiar with Scrum, it's perfect because the Nexus framework is using it as a base framework. Nexus takes the Scrum framework and adapts it to the larger scale of multiple teams. We still have product backlog, we still have product owner, we still have Scrum Master. There are some new events, some new artifacts, there's some new role, but they are built on top of the Scrum framework. All right, let's start from the beginning. Product backlog. Product backlog is a core artifact in Scrum, and it plays an important role in the Nexus framework as well. It's the same product backlog from Scrum framework, but it's likely going to be bigger as there are multiple teams using it for storing user stories, tasks, and actions. So it's natural that it may contain more items. The number of items is one thing, but there is a second thing, the size of the items as well. The size of the items, they might also be bigger, especially the ones that are not broken down yet into smaller ones. If we have large product, it's natural to have large initiatives that they are waiting for the decomposition in the right moment in the future. The items that are on the top of the backlog, which obviously means that they have the highest priority, should be of course decomposed already. They should be well described and be ready to take on the upcoming sprint. The product backlog is owned and managed by product owner, just like in a Scrum framework, and the product owner is responsible for making sure that the backlog is prioritized based on the needs of the business. Very important. Let's don't forget also that important aspect of the product backlog is in the Nexus framework and as well as in a Scrum framework is that it needs to be continuously refined. It means that the product owner and the teams are constantly reviewing and updating backlog to ensure that it reflects the latest information and priorities. All right, that was Nexus product backlog. The next, Nexus sprint planning. Nexus sprint planning, in contrast to Scrum sprint planning, is more like a container for a few events. There is a regular sprint planning done by individual teams, but before that there is a small coordination meeting where representatives from each team, not all the teams, not entire teams, just the representatives of the teams, they discuss the Nexus sprint goal. And the Nexus sprint goal, it's a sprint goal from the high level perspective, right? They discuss which team could do which part of the work, what are the dependencies between the teams, how to address these dependencies, etc. And after that coordination meeting, the representatives share the outcome in their own teams, and they have just a regular sprint planning meeting as in a Scrum framework. Outcome of the Nexus sprint planning is first formulated Nexus sprint goal, and second, the Nexus sprint backlog needs to be created. The Nexus sprint backlog reflects the work that needs to be done to achieve the Nexus sprint goal. Because Nexus involves multiple teams working together on the same product, the planning needs to be managed well carefully to ensure that each team is working on the most valuable and important work. When Nexus sprint planning is completed, we should have a good quality Nexus sprint backlog. It is very similar to sprint backlog that we know from Scrum framework. The difference here is that it contains more tasks. We talked about it already. Just the sprint backlog contains all the tasks from all the teams. And thanks to that, we ensure that all teams are able to see the bigger picture of the work that needs to be done during the sprint. They see dependencies, they are aware of these dependencies, they can react if they notice there is some risks of delay. It is very important to have that flexibility. They need to clearly see all of the work that needs to be done to produce integrated increment at the end of the sprint. We'll talk shortly about integrated increment. What's next? We have Nexus sprint goal formulated. Perfect. We have Nexus sprint backlog created. Very nice. The next step is to simply do the work. And to do that, we need to constantly keep in our minds that all Nexus teams work together. All right? There are no silos. The teams need to feel that they work together. They share the responsibility for final results. They are dependent from each other. They should help each other every day if needed. All right? They should collaborate every single day to make sure that they move towards the Nexus sprint goal. And integrated increment is a result of common work of all the teams, not just one team. How can we help here with this day-to-day monitoring? Well, the Nexus Daily Scrum. To ensure that teams work together, they have a regular daily Nexus Daily Scrum meetings. The teams have their own daily Scrum, as in Scrum framework, where they discuss the progress towards the Nexus sprint goal. They ensure the transparency of the work and they keep the process of inspection and adaptation. But the additional part in the Nexus framework takes place before these teams meetings. There is a meeting called Nexus Daily Scrum, and it is a meeting dedicated to the representatives of the teams. They should meet and look at the work from the high perspective. All right? Check if the teams are integrating work with each other. Check if there are any dependencies between teams that needs to be taken care of. Check if the integrated increment that all of the teams are working on is going well. So these kind of topics. The teams are working every day, and when the work is completed, well, hopefully it is completed, we have next event called the Nexus Sprint Review. The new part compared to the Scrum framework is that it is the event that we are going to review the integrated increment. And integrated means it's a result of the work of all teams, not individual team anymore, all teams together. We don't focus so much on a single team outcome, all right, anymore. We focus more on a result that of the collaboration of all teams. I would say this is the moment where the team members might feel that they are not in Scrum framework anymore. This is a good part, of course. It's not anymore about single team results. All right, it's about the cooperation of all Scrum teams. And on Nexus Sprint Review, the teams present the integrated increment to stakeholders and receive feedback about it, obviously. And this is a great opportunity to create high transparency across the teams. They see all team members, they see the big picture of the work. They feel they are participating now in something bigger than just the work of their own team. After the Nexus Sprint Review, we have the Nexus Sprint Retrospective. It's a container for a few meetings. It's not just one meeting anymore, like in a Scrum framework. But you know, Nexus is based on Scrum framework, so there are of course a regular sprint retrospectives for each individual team. But there are two additional meetings around that, one meeting before and one meeting after. And these two additional meetings, they are dedicated for the representatives of each team. And the goal is to look at the sprint from high perspective and discuss the challenges and improvements that can be applied to all teams, not one team, to all teams. And the usual topics are, well, what challenges have we faced when it comes to the dependencies this sprint? How can we address them to avoid some problems, some issues the next time? Then how can we improve the collaboration for all teams? These kind of topics. So to summarize, the first meeting is for representatives only. The outcome of their discussion is shared with the individual teams, and the results of the outcome of these individual teams is collected and shared on the last meeting for the representatives only again, where they share what the teams have proposed in terms of improvements. All right, next item I would like to describe is the Nexus integration team. I have already mentioned a few times that some meetings are dedicated to the representatives of the teams. In reality, its Nexus integration team is made of Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the representatives. All right, this team is the new role in Nexus framework compared to the Scrum framework. Natural question is, why is it there? What is the purpose of having Nexus integration team? Well, if we want to scale Scrum to multiple teams, we will immediately face the big challenge when it comes to the dependencies. Nexus integration team has exactly this accountability to make sure that dependencies are transparent, they are accountable that integrated increment was created during the sprint, They will not do the actual work, of course, as this is the role of the Scrum Teams. But they do, the Nexus integration team, they do need to make sure that the communication is on the right level, that the dependencies are identified and transparent to all teams, that all Scrum teams are working towards the Nexus sprint goal and integrated increment. I would say that if team members in Scrum team feel that the cooperation between teams is not working well, they know that they should raise it to the Nexus integration team, and they will work together with all teams to address these issues. All right, that would be it when it comes to the high-level overview of the Nexus framework. Just a few words about myself at the end of the webinar. My name is Rafał Zalewski. I'm a project lead in GetInData. I have years of experience in Scrum and Agile. I hold certificates like Scaled Professional Scrum, the Nexus Framework, the topic that we have just discussed, Professional Scrum Master 2, Professional Scrum Product Owner 1, Agile Project Manager Practitioner Prince 2, ITIL 4. I also hold technical certificates like AWS Solution Architect Associate and Google Cloud Professional Cloud Architect. If you would like to talk more about Scrum and Agile, you are very much welcome to contact me. I will be glad to answer your questions. Thanks, and let's stay in touch.